What's going on YouTube? Cloverbells here, back with another Scarlet Violet video, and today we're going to be talking about how you can beat Dondozo Tatsugiri. Again, it's a pretty prevalent dominant duo. When you just look at Dondozo's stats, right, and then of course Tatsugiri, the idea here is, if you don't know how this combination works, Tatsugiri is able to hop into Dondozo's mouth, and Dondozo gets an omniboost, and an omniboost is really good just because of the amount of pressure it can put on. We know what Dondozo can do in terms of stat-wise. It's a lot of HP, pretty good attack stat, also very good defense, not so great special defense, but again, you're getting the omniboost. So, the question now is, well, how do you deal with this? Like, it's still doing really well in tournaments. It's won quite a bit of tournaments already, but it's not unbeatable, and there are ways to deal with it, and there are certain tools that you can have on your team that you can use or you can put into your team building process to help you deal with the Dondozo Tatsugiri stuff. Now, granted, again, it's not like a sure victory, again, of course, because they're still able to play around those things that you have on your team and still be able to come out on top. But at least it gives your team the option to be able to deal with Dondozo stuff, right? So that's why I never like to put in the title of my video like beat Dondozo. Like, I never like to use the word beat. I prefer to use the word deal, right? Because you're not going to necessarily win the game, but at the very least you can still neuter the effect, so that way you're able to go get past the Dondozo stuff. All right, so, and again, we're going to be relying on consistent options here. We're not going to be using like silly little gimmicks like mirror herb stuff. Like I know there's a couple of those running around, but we're just going to be going with reliable, consistent options that you can use and have on your team building. So this way, again, you're able to deal, not stop, but deal with Dondozo Tatsugiri. So let's go ahead and get started with the first one. Okay, so the first concept that we're going to talk about is probably the easiest way to help you deal with Dondozo Tatsugiri, and that's the idea of Haze. And there's a couple of Pokemon that can do it. So the most popular ones that can do it is, of course, Murkrow, because it has Prankster. And the idea here is, this is why the birth of the Make It Rain combination was born, right? Because with Murkrow, you're able to go for Priority Haze, and then that removes all stat changes. So anything that the Dondozo had, with the Order Up boosts, and as well as the Tatsugiri stuff, you can remove all of that immediately with Haze, and then use your other slot to start dealing damage and put on pressure against the Dondozo, right? So that's one way to do it. And then you also have Gengar that can do this, and this is also part of Gengar's role in the meta. I was going to do like a separate video entirely on Gengar because it has a lot of different roles for what it can do, especially on like those hyper offensive Tailwind teams. But the idea again is also with Gengar, it also possesses Haze. The only difference here is that it's not priority, unlike Murkrow's Prankster, but you're still able to go for Haze, and it's still a very fast Haze user, which is still pretty good in a sense, right? Because if you're the fastest Pokemon on the field, then it's almost like Prankster, right? Because you're going first regardless. But again, same idea. You're able to go for Haze, remove those boosts, and then these two are like, again, your more consistent options. This one, we're mentioning it because it had results in a tournament, but this one is not as consistent and maybe not as strong as the other two. That's Vaporeon, who also has Haze and also has Water Absorb. So the idea here is, if Dondozo goes for its stab water move, it's not going to work because of Water Absorb, and then any kind of boost that it gets from Order Up, you can just again remove it with Haze. And Vaporeon's actually relatively bulky, not so bulky on the defensive side, but that's okay. You can EV it so that it can have some defensive bulk. But the idea is with with Muddy Water and Calm Mind, and then Protect, and then something with like leftovers, what you're able to do is you're able to just remove those boosts, with Haze, and then just like start clicking Calm Mind, start protecting, alternating those things, and then start dealing damage with like Muddy Water spam, right? So there's the idea there. But again, it only really worked on like that one team that did well in the tournament. I haven't really seen it since. So this is like your two more reliable options, right? So that's why you see stuff like Murkrow, and then Goldango, and then Hydreigon, for example. You're just able to remove those special attack reduction moves, and then at the same time, same idea with Dondozo. You just were able to remove those boosts, and then your big sweepers can then just finish the game, right? So that's the idea with Haze. So now let's move on to the next idea on how you can deal with Dondozo. Okay, so the next idea is, well, what if I can't remove the boost from Dondozo? Or what if I don't have Haze on the team? Can I still, you know, plow through? And the answer is yes. You have something called Meowscarada. This is also why Meowscarada started rising in the meta like a couple of weeks ago, because you're basically Urshifu on light mode, right? You just have Flower Trick, and you just get a critical hit no matter what. So all those defense boosts, all those screens behind Dondozo, they don't matter. You're just able to just power through it and then just crit through it, right? And then the idea here is that if Dondozo doesn't terrestrialize, you just remove it from the game, right? Because it's a water type and you have super effective damage. And if you have a choice band, forget it. Dondozo ain't doing nothing to you. So there's the idea there. And if you have Meowscarada as opposed to like the Amoongus, then this is again another way where you can just like punch it. Now, because of this is also why the Dondozos are going for the Terra Steel option, right? So with the Terra Steel option, you're able to resist the grass stuff. So that'll help in that sense for them. But then, now with the steel stuff, you're weak to a fire type, which we'll get into another time stamp in the video, where, maybe the steel type Terra is just not so great. But even if they do go for this, you still have like your fire type Pokemon in the back that you can deal with Dondozo. And that's actually more favorable because, normally you don't want to put your fire type in front of a water type, but if it goes for Terra Steel, now you can deal super effective damage to it. It still has access to its water status, but again, you have your own Terra to counteract that as well, right? So Meowscarada can just ignore those boosts, power through with Flower Trick. So that's another way you can use to deal with Dondozo. Let's keep on moving. The next idea to help you deal with Dondozo is similar to idea number one in terms of removing the boosts. So not Haze, but something called Clear Smog, and the most common user that has access to it is the Amoongus. And this is also why Amoongus is like within the top 5 of the meta right now. It's because of this move. Yes, you have the slow speed where you can just click Spore and stuff, and also Rage Powder to protect your Pokemon from the Dondozo. But ultimately, if you can just use one Clear Smog, you can just remove all those boosts from the Dondozo, and then you're kind of just chilling from there, right? So there's the idea there. And again, this is also why the Dondozos are going for the Terra Steel option, so this way you don't have to get hit by that posing move. So there's that. But ideally, again, you still need your partner Pokemon to finish the job, right? Like, just because you remove the boost, Dondozo's still sitting on the field dealing damage. Now, again, you still need to remove it from play. Yes, you got rid of the buffs, that's great, but the Pokemon is still there, right? So again, it helps, but it can't be the only thing that you have on your team to deal with it. You need a +1 along with the Amoongus, right? And in addition to Amoongus, there's another Pokemon that also gets access to Clear Smog, and that's the Gastrodon. And this is also why they run like Earth Power, Clear Smog, and then 2 filler moves. It could be like Icy Wind and then Recover, for example, right? So what you're able to do is, because of Storm Drain, which is a really good ability in front of Dondozo, you're able to absorb those water stat moves, and Gastrodon just gets a special attack boost, and then you're able to just go for Earth Powers, or again also go for Clear Smog. You literally can just sit in front of it and just keep clicking Clear Smogs and Earth Powers, and Dondozo can't really do too much unless it has, again, that Terra Steel option, right? So there is the idea there, but again, you may have seen the Gastrodon and Amoongus on a certain core like this with Rotom Heat, and then of course you had that option with Garchomp, and then there was, I believe it was Grimmsnarl, and then the Corviknight, right? Something like this. This is the team that was running around. I believe we did something similar in terms of a team building where you had the Dragon, Fairy, Steel, Fire, Water, Grass combination. And these two are just able to help you deal with Dondozo, while the Garchomp, Rotom, and even the Corviknight are just able to go through and carry you into the end game where, they can just finish the job after the Dondozo has all its stats removed, right? So that's the idea there with Amoongus and Gastrodon, the Clear Smog stuff, and again, the Storm Drain stuff. And then there's other Pokemon that get Storm Drain, but again, it still has the boost, right? So you still have to find a way to deal with it, but I think these are your 2 more consistent options in terms of using Clear Smog. So definitely give them a go and put them on your team if you need it. But let's move on to the next option. All right, and another new option is, again, with the ability to sit in front of Dondozo and just not care even if it does have the boost. So another good water option to have on your team besides Gastrodon is the Azumarill. And this is also why Azumarill has started rising in the meta as well. We did a video on this. And with the Azumarill, literally with this water typing, you know, Dondozo's water moves are just not very effective. And then if it wants to go for order up and keep boosting itself, it can't because you're a fairy type. So now what you could do is, you know, it's literally sit in front of Dondozo, and if it's a dragon type Terra that it's going for order up, it's not going to do anything, and you can just go for player up and just start dealing like big chunky damage to the Dondozo. And you know, a lot of them are starting to run Life Orb just to be able to help you out there, you know, just to quickly remove the Dondozo stuff. Same with like Tatsugiri. Once the Dondozo's dead, you just have fairy pressure against the Tatsugiri. So, you know, if you see like Azumarill on those Fire, Water, Grass, Dragon, Fairy, Steel cores, and if they don't even have the Amoongus, then again, they have the Azumarill for that. And because of this, you kind of have to like protect the Azumarill and, you know, make sure it doesn't get taken out by the other non-Dondozo options. So, you know, unless you have the Dondozo, protect the Azumarill, let it battle Dondozo one-on-one if it can. You know, so, you know, don't just send it out in front of Meowscarada, for example, right? So there's the idea there. And again, if you, the water fairy type is actually really nice. And this is also why, to an extent, why Mimikyu was starting to rise a little bit, especially the Life Orb set. Because again, with the Life Orb player up stuff, you're also able to more or less just do the same thing, put pressure on the Dondozo. It can't click its dragon move against you, and you're able to take one of those water hits just fine, because you know you have a disguise stuff, and then you can just make this like super bulky, like all HP and all attack, and just be able to go on from there, right? But more or less, the Azumarill is the more consistent option, just because you're able to resist those water attacks anyway from the get-go, right? So yeah, consider Azumarill on your team building to help you deal with Dondozo. All right, let's move on to the next option. Okay, the next option is one that's actually one of my favorites. So we talked about grass options to deal with Dondozo. We talked about water options. What about a fire option? You know, it's a little weird when you can talk about a fire option that can deal with Dondozo, because naturally it's a water type, but the Skeledirge can do just that. And the main reason it can do that is because it has this ability called Unaware. And if you don't know, you can technically just read it on the screen like this, where it says the Pokemon ignores other Pokemon stat changes when taking or doing damage, which is actually very, very important. So what you can do is sit in front of Dondozo, spam your Torch Songs, and once you get a good enough attack boost, go for those hard-hitting Shadow Balls, and then you have this recovery with Slack Off, where, you know, whatever Dondozo was dealing to you, you can just heal it right back, and then just keep going for your Torch Songs and Shadow Balls, right? Now you might say, well, but you're a fire type. You know, you can't really take that water type attack from the Dondozo. This is why they always go with Terra Grass on the Skeledirge, and then Citrus Berry over here for a little bit more recovery. But this is the idea. You go for Terra Grass in front of the Dondozo. You're able to absorb those water attacks and then the dragon attacks. Again, you just don't really care because you have this ability called Unaware. And then you just, again, keep going for Torch Songs and Shadow Balls and Slack Offs, and just keep recovering the damage that you take until you just finally beat the Dondozo, right? And again, if they go for their Terra Steel option, which that's great for you because you have a super effective fire move against it, right? So this is arguably maybe one of the best options in terms of like putting on pressure against the Dondozo. Like Murkrow can remove the buffs, so can Amoongus, but those two Pokemon can't really deal big damage right back, but the Skeledirge can. And the Life Orb Azumarill can also do that to an extent, right? So if you need a fire type on your team and you don't have a Dondozo check, consider Skeledirge. It's a really good mon. It's placed well in a lot of tournaments recently, and for that reason, right? So let's keep on going. All right, the next option is also a much more newer one that came maybe like within the week, but there was a rental going around with Scope Lens Hydreigon, and the idea was with Draco Meteor and Focus Energy, okay, along with the Scope Lens, you're able to basically crit every time. So even if Dondozo has all those boosts, all right, you know, same like Meowscarada, you can just crit right through it. Hydreigon can do the same thing. So what you can do is, if you're paired with a redirector, like maybe let's say Maushold or maybe an Amoongus, set up your Focus Energy and then just go for those Draco Meteors and then just crit right through the Dondozo, and you can pretty much one-shot it if it doesn't have the right EV spread. And even if it does, it's not left with a lot of HP, and you know, any kind of chip damage would just beat it, right? But this is a much newer strategy than some of the older ones. But again, it's another tool that you can use on your Hydreigon squads that can deal with the Dondozo. Now, if you are going in the tournament with the open team sheet play and the opponent as a Dondozo player sees this, they're going to be a little bit more aware, so you have to watch out for that. But again, you still have the threat, and you know, just because you know they have it doesn't mean that they can stop it, right? So if you're able to go for that focus energy, you just crit right through a Draco Meter and the Dondozo goes bye-bye. Tatsugiri also can't really do too much for the same reason, you know, it just drops to a Draco Meter, especially through the crit, right? So definitely consider this as an option if you haven't tried so already. We did a whole video on this if you go back on the channel. It's about Scope Lens Hydreigon, so yeah, definitely give that a watch if you haven't done so. But yeah, this is another option, and next we'll conclude with one more option that maybe is not as common as these other 6, but it is still an option. All right, so let's take a look. All right, the last option that we're going to talk about here is Gallade, actually, you know, believe it or not. Now, if you look at, you know, a lot of these tournament teams, sometimes you might see like a random Gallade on them, and some of them have had a couple top cut results, and you might say, well, why? Well, what does Gallade do that can help you against Dondozo? So, well, just to look at its stats for a second, you know, base 125 attack is actually really nice. Special defense, very, very bulky. Defense, not so bulky, so that's not great for Dondozo. But you can still make this a little bit more bulky. You know, if you have like an Amoongus to help you out there, that'll also be good. But the whole idea is you have access to Sacred Sword, just like Qianpao before it was removed, you know, in terms of like Paradox Monster. But Sacred Sword, what it does is it'll it'll ignore the target stat changes. So, you know, Dondozo could get to plus 50 defense. It's not going to matter because Sacred Sword is still just going to do like more consistent damage. And if you have Terra Fighting with like Life Orb, it does a lot. You can pretty much just two-shot the Dondozo stuff. And if you don't believe me, I have the damage calc here over on Pokesports here. So let's say you're using Aaron trailers like bulkier Dondozo, you know, not just straight 252, 252. It has some HP investment, and we already gave it like a defense boost. Now with Gallade, what you're able to do is, you know, just go for a Sacred Sword. If you Trashalize into the fighting type, Sacred Sword with the Life Orb, might I add, will pretty much just exactly do like 50% in terms of like a bulkier Dondozo. So that's really nice. You just have to be able to have another Pokemon in the field to maybe just redirect that damage a little bit, but still put pressure on the Dondozo with the power to two-hit the Dondozo through all those buffs, right? And again, you can go to like +6, for example. Sacred Sword doesn't care about that. You know, the damage stays the same. You know, I even just put +6 right away. So this was a little bit used in the earlier parts of the format. You know, it has dropped a little bit, but there's still like quite a few people still using Gallade in terms of like the Sacred Sword pressure. I think it's really nice. It still gives you pressure against like steel types, especially King Gambit. So you have that option there. But yeah, that's why I put it like on the last part of the list. It's not as like good as the others, but it's still pretty solid. You know, so if you want to like try something a little bit non-meta, the Gallade option with Sacred Sword is able to do the job. It doesn't get the benefit from Sharpness, by the way. That's for something like Psycho Cut. You know, it's a stat move that you get, but Sacred Sword in itself, the fact that you can ignore those defense boosts from Dondozo makes it something to consider in using against it. All right. And now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about maybe like one honorable mention option that you can do. But again, it's not part of our list necessarily because it doesn't really help so much, but it does help a little bit. Okay, so I guess we should still talk about it. So let's take a look at that. Okay, our honorable mention for the list in terms of like trying to deal with Dondozo is this idea for Rotom-Wash. All right, wait, oops. Yeah, there we go. I was wondering what happened to my Ragdoll music. I think it was I paused it by accident because I was trying to type something and then, you know, nothing was coming out. So Rotom-Wash with Will-O-Wisp. This gets our honorable mention on the list for today. Basically, again, you're a bulky water type, so you're able to at least take a couple hits of those order ups, not order ups, the liquidations or the wave crashes, especially with like a max HP Rotom, and you have this option for Will-O-Wisp. So you can burn the Dondozo at the very least. That helps a little bit, you know, because Dondozo hurts, but if you can burn it, even if it's like +2, it's not hitting so hard. And if it has like spread moves like Earthquake, that's not really hitting so much. right? The problem with Will-O-Wisp is it's still not stopping the damage increases from order up. So like if it's +2 at the start, great, but if you don't get rid of the Dondozo, it'll still go to like +4, +5, +6, and even if it's burned, that's still like considerable damage. So, you know, but at the very least, in the beginning, you can mitigate a lot of its big damage and maybe rely on another big hitter to wither its way into the Dondozo's HP. But Will-O-Wisp is still not too bad, okay? And it's good to have it on a bulky water type like Rotom that can at least sit in front of it. And if it doesn't Terra, then of course you have a super effective electric move against it, and you'll win this endgame if you have a Dondozo that, you know, is still water type or went for Terra Water, for example, and is just only clicking order ups. You burn it, you'll win that endgame because you can deal Thunderbolt damage to it, and Dondozo's special defense is not so great. So, you know, for that reason, Rotom, Will-O-Wisp gets the honorable mention on our list, and Rotom-Wash is on a lot of teams, and you'll see that it also has Will-O-Wisp. So it's another tool to use against Dondozo, along with like Clear Slavonk, Amoongus, and a bunch of other things. So let me know what you think of the options we presented. If you think we missed one, let me know in the comments below. But hopefully those 7 options gave you a little bit of insight on how to stop or deal with Dondozo. You know, just to have like consistent options in your team building to help you deal with it, because it is a threat. It is topping and winning tournaments, and you know, you can't just let that thing run wild. You got to have a check to it in your team building. All right, so that'll be it for this time, guys. And again, if you haven't joined the Discord, be sure to join the Discord. We've been getting a lot of new members, so definitely give that a go. And if you are interested in a team building session with me, we've done a lot of those already. Check out the video description below. That's a tier 3 sub to the channel where you and I, we sit down at the Discord call and we hash out EVs for your team. And then maybe we test it out in a couple battles. Or if you have a team yourself and you just want me to fix that up a little bit in terms of optimizing the EV spreads, that's a tier 2 sub to the channel. So again, take a look at the video description and sign up, and then just message me on Discord or message me on Twitter, and we'll book our session, and then we'll get you going from there. All right, so we'll be back in the next one, guys. Peace out and have a good night.